Okay, so the momentum towards the launch of PlayStation 5 Pro continues, and well, we now have firm details on what one of the generation's most visually impressive games is going to deliver on PlayStation 5 Pro. Remedy has put out a blog post detailing how it intends to enhance Alan Wake 2. Similar to the base PlayStation 5 version, there's going to be two quality modes, a 30 FPS mode and a 60 frames per second mode, right? A performance mode. Now, here's the thing 30 frames per second is going to be featuring ray tracing support, which appears to be essentially RT reflections. And it's going to have a base resolution of 1224p using PSSR to upscale to 4K. Good stuff. Now let's talk about the performance mode. This one is intriguing because Remedy's decision for 60 frames per second here is, again, to use PSSR, but it's going to be upscaling from 864p to 4K. Previously, there was I think it was 870p, and it upscaled to 1440p, and then the GPU did like a sort of naive upscale to 4K. The difference here is that they're looking to use essentially graphics settings broadly equivalent to PlayStation 5, the base PlayStation 5's quality mode. So, essentially, they're retaining the original resolutions by and large of the base PlayStation 5 game, but they're upping the quality of those modes, and they're relying upon PSSR machine learning based upscaling to essentially deliver the image quality. I'm going to go to you first on this one, Oliver. The ray tracing mode in particular, I mean, Alex has basically described it as lower than PC's low settings. Reaction online has been ray tracing at 30 FPS. This isn't really what I expected from the PlayStation 5 Pro, but it is what it is, and I think it's looking like a pretty impressive lineup of settings adjustments for each mode. What do you think?
Yeah, despite any compromises that may or may not be going on there with the BVH and whatnot, the distance of the reflections, I mean, I think it looks pretty compelling. The base PS5 version and the other console versions, of course, had these kind of grainy screen space reflections that I really didn't think looked that great. Even when you didn't have any occlusion issues, it didn't look that amazing to me. Not the best screen space reflections implementation I've seen. Did not look that great in a lot of circumstances. This does improve things a lot in terms of that reflective detail. And I also imagine that image quality should be improved quite a bit, going from 1224p to 4K here, which is like a similar magnitude to what we saw on PS5. Of course, here, though, with PSSR as opposed to FSR2, which did not really flatter this game that much, I must say. So that's positive, and I think they're achieving good results there. In the performance mode, I think the results that we're seeing are maybe a bit more curious because doing 4K from 864p, even with something like DLSS, can be a challenge. And here, judging from this footage, the image quality doesn't seem 100% where I'd like it to be. I'm not seeing necessarily an indication that some of those image quality issues in the performance mode on PS5 have been comprehensively addressed. Like in that dark ballroom environment, you are getting a lot of aliasing, a lot of specular nastiness. Likewise on the rooftop area, in the outdoors. And I think that PSSR probably isn't resolving a stable enough image there. But I guess to be fair, these are darker environments with a lot of like highlights, and that is a tough area. That was a tough area in the original game. On PS5, probably a tough area here as well for PSSR to deal with. So we'll have to see how the final game fares. But just in those two sample shots of performance mode footage, I do wonder if maybe a more conservative upscale factor might have served them a little better. But we'll have to see how that final game shakes out because this is just a very brief tease. And it could be the case, too, that image detail for sure is there, right? We can't quite tell from this, but it could be the case that, yeah, it's resolving a really sharp image, maybe not a super stable image, but we'll just have to wait and see for that final patch in a few weeks to see how that ultimately shakes out.
Yeah, absolutely. John, what do you think about this?
I guess the first thing that you're hit with when you think about this is like they're instantly sort of going against Mark Cerny's presentation, where the whole idea was like, hey, you get quality mode, but with 60 FPS. But when you actually dig into the details, like you noted, that's kind of what the performance mode has become, aside from the resolution. that is basically the PS5's performance mode. So this is really interesting then, because they're kind of like both doing what it was suggested the Pro is designed to do, but then also still sticking with 30 FPS as an option to push the visuals higher. I actually do think, despite, I feel like when you say lower than low, that makes the results sound bad, but in terms of what actually is shown here, I think it looks quite good, despite those limitations, and it is a gigantic leap from the screen space reflections, which, as you noted, Oliver, they're extremely noisy in the original console version of this, just really, really ugly. And in fact, that's the other part, is that while I agree that the performance mode resolve is not perfect, like you say as well, Oliver, I still think it's instantly more pleasing than what we saw previously, because I think this was a game that really did not work well with FSR2. It showed all the limitations of FSR2, which is so much like noisy, ghosty, smeary looking results. Like if you looked at a still shot of the game in motion, where it's in motion, then you freeze it, and you look at a freeze frame, it's just a mess of pixels with FSR, right? Like it was bad. This does at least seem to be significantly less so, though still in performance mode less than I might like. But I do think this seems like a nice overall upgrade, and I wouldn't mind playing this version. Obviously the PC version is still going to be king here if you have a very high spec PC, because the full, what did they call it? It's like sort of semi path trace. It's still based on rasterization, but they gave it like, it's like was it overdrive, RTX overdrive? I forget what the option was on PC, but you could push the ray tracing features way up.
Yeah.
Beyond.
Right. Yes. They call it full RT, but
Full
it was
RT.
basically, it was a kind of merging of rasterization
Right.
GI and path trace GI.
And it was effective. It's really good on PC, but it is very demanding. I guess I'm a little, the one thing I would have liked to have seen, I don't know how much headroom they have, is it would have been nice to have a 40 FPS mode here. Again,
Yeah.
we don't know what the headroom is here, but I think that would have been a really cool thing if they could have gotten that working. But this is kind of where I expect we'll be. I don't think quality and performance modes are going away anytime soon. I think we might see some patches early on, aside from this, where maybe on PS5 suddenly you don't need to choose. Like I think Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is going to be that way, where essentially you want to use the high quality mode designed for PS5 Pro, and it's 60 FPS and it's got better image quality, and that's it. But I think going forward, we're going to see plenty of games that are just like this, where they say, well, if you really want this high quality, you still got to go with 30 FPS. And it's just, there's just no way to ensure that developers are going to always target X frame rate, right? Like just if there's power there, developers are free to use it as they please. And that's just how it is. And that's how it's going to remain.
Yeah. I mean, looking at the assets that Remedy has put out here, I think they are actually quite honest with the performance mode.
Yep.
If they had just stuck to, Saga walking through the forest at a slow pace, I think it would have looked at, that it would have not exposed any of the issues that you're seeing here. And it probably would have looked absolutely fantastic. But, they've actually used fast-paced action, which is, a challenge for any reconstruction-based upscaler. So, if this is basically what you might call one of the most challenging scenarios for upscaling, I think it looks fine. I think people are probably still going to gravitate to the 60 frames per second mode. In terms of the ray tracing mode, there still seems to be this kind of misconception that PlayStation 5 Pro is going to be some kind of RTX 4090 style rendering beast. It's not, it can't be, it never was. So this is entirely in line with expectations. And yeah, the lower than low stuff is quite an interesting comment to make, but at the same time, you kind of want developers to be producing custom optimized versions for most consistent performance. That's the bottom line. And you look at these ray tracing effects. You've got opaque, transparent reflections. It all looks great. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that. Hopefully, good job, Remedy. This is going to be obviously one of the ones we fast track for coverage. once we get to grips with the hardware. We don't have it yet.